Hi guys, in this tutorial I'm looking at the summer 2018 Macbeth question, AQA's paper, and this paper was looking at the attitudes of Macbeth and Banquo towards the supernatural. Now I remember students coming out of this being really upset and bothered because the question asks you to focus on their attitudes in the extract and the play as a whole, and as they point out, Banquo's killed fairly early and we don't see a huge amount of him. So they were quite bothered by how and where to find evidence for that part of the question. So hopefully we'll tackle that in this session. In this session I'm going to look at the extract and planning, and then I'm going to do a follow-up where I show you a full mark response. Okay, so this question is taken from Act 1, Scene 3. So we know from dramatic structures, some of you may have done Freytag's pyramid, where you get exposition, rising action, climax, falling action, and then the denouement or resolution. But basic principle, an exposition is an introduction, and it's an introduction to plot and character, maybe setting, certainly themes and ideas. So if you get an extract that focuses on Act 1, think about what is Shakespeare doing in terms of introducing an audience to something particular. And we're told in this context info that at this point, after receiving the witch's prophecies, they've just been told Duncan's made Macbeth the Thane of Cawdor. So we know that one has come true, and they're just in this one has kind of come true already, and they're going to be in this state where something evil, something from sort of, a dark supernatural force has made a prophecy, and yet something has come true. So there's confirmation of that, and it gives the witches an authority and an accuracy. But then let's look at the two contrasting responses to this event. Banquo's, which is the first bit in the extract, is far more cautious, and he talks about it's strange and often to win us to harm, instruments of darkness tell us truths, win us an honest trifle to betray in deepest consequences. So his initial reaction, think about these as metaphors, winning to a harm and instruments of darkness. He thinks about, if you win something, you have to have played a game in order to win, and therefore this idea that human actions, human activities are something of a game to this supernatural force, and his sense is that their intent is to win us to our harm, that their influence is always evil, and that they are looking to corrupt and to cause harm and problems to people. He refers to these witches with the metaphor, the instruments of darkness, and I think about an instrument as something we play, something we use. And again, so these witches are a sort of vessel. They are a mode for evil, the devil, to be used to corrupt people. They are an instrument of darkness. They are clearly a negative and toxic influence. And his focus is that they might tell us truths and win us with honesty, but in order to betray us. And that juxtaposition between honesty and truth and betrayal shows how practical and realistic Banquo is. He has the accurate view of witches in terms of, King James's own paranoia and terror about witches. And so he fits in with a sort of acceptable, he has the right, as audiences at the time would think, he has the right attitude to witches, which is to be suspicious and to be fearful. Now, Macbeth then goes on to speak, and we see in this aside, the aside itself is important because it already shows that he is unwilling to sort of express these thoughts in front of his friend, and therefore there's an awareness that his response is different and problematic. And interestingly, he focuses purely on the positives. Two truths are told. He focuses on the witches in a deluded way, thinking that they're truthful and honest. And obviously he's just benefited in terms of being given the title Thane of Cawdor. And his focusing is on a prologue. Prologue's a dramatic term. It's an opening, it's a preview of something. And so he thinks about these as a happy prologue, these truths, to the swelling act, that metaphor meaning something bigger to come. And he refers about the imperial theme, so he's very focused on becoming king. So his initial attitude is the positive, that these witches have given him truths, and these are positive, they are good, and they're an introduction for something, a swelling act, something bigger to come. And he then is, you know, back in the zone, talking to the other characters that have arrived on stage, but then he's back thinking, isn't he, to himself. This supernatural soliciting, and that interesting term there, soliciting, it's kind of, it shows it's kind of transactional. He's aware that the witches have a purpose in this. And we get this syntactic parallelism where lines, phrases are structured in a really similar way. It can't be ill and it can't be good. This does sort of demonstrate a degree of conflict, doesn't it? And he goes in with these two conditional sentences, the ones that start with if. If ill, why is it giving me success? So he's saying, if this is a bad thing, then why on earth am I getting this promotion, Thane of Cawdor? But then he's saying, if it's a good thing, why am I yielding or giving in to the suggestion whose horrid image and fix my hair and makes my... He's saying, so if this is a good, you know, a good thing that the witches have told me, why am I already giving in to a horrid image? Ambiguous though that might be, we can speculate that this is killing Duncan. And the thought of that makes his hair stand on end, it makes his heart kind of go into overdrive against the use of nature. And this idea of, you know, committing regicide is going against kind of, you know, the great chain of being, the idea of, you know, God ordained kings, and he is really, you know, going to be going against the natural order of things. My thought, whose murder yet is but fantastical, you know, a more explicit reference to the sense that he is immediately fantasizing about imagining killing Duncan. Yes, this is shaking him, his conscience, his mind is shaken by this, and it's making everything feel uncertain and worrying, but the reality is that he's taken what the witches have said and views this in a very positive light. So when we start to think about the rest of the play then, as usual I split this into beginning, middle and end. I look at the beginning being Act 1 and 2, middle 3 and end 4 and 5. And I think about, okay, well from the beginning clearly we've got the extract, but I think it's also worth looking at other elements of Act 1 Scene 3. You know, when the witches have made these predictions and they're leaving, he uses that imperative stay imperfect speakers. He has a desire for more knowledge, which I think is interesting. Also in Act 1, Scene 5, the very fact he writes to Lady Macbeth about this interaction is probably quite significant in how he values it. And we've also got, you know, within Act 2, Scene 1, we've got the hallucination of the dagger. Is it a hallucination, or is it genuinely an evil supernatural visitation guiding him to Duncan? Your interpretation there. And we also have, you know, thinking about Banquo, Banquo fears Macbeth's role in Duncan's death. He talks about, I fear that you've played most sort of foully for it. So it does touch back on. Banquo asks to meet with Macbeth to kind of discuss this interaction that they had. So within Act 3, we can obviously talk about other supernatural incidents. We can talk about Banquo's ghost and Macbeth being traumatized by that visitation. Again, open to an interpretation, is it even real or is it a hallucination, given that nobody else sees it? And we can think about the end of Act 3 where he resolves to return to the witches for good or bad, he wants to know. And then we can move on to think about in Act 4 that return to the witches and the fact he trusts and then acts on their warning about beware Macduff in terms of slaughtering the family. And then I would probably be thinking around Act 5 where he considers, when he realises that they've manipulated him and he refers to them as juggling fiends. And you think about literally juggling something, playing with it, and that's what he sort of contemplates there. Okay, so that's my approach to this question in terms of planning and organising my ideas. Next video, I will take you through my answer.